is Thursday, the 31st of May, 2018, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
Oh, Marsh, you've been on holiday.
I've been on holiday.
You've been off on your holidays.
I was away for a full week, 7 days. I never take a holiday for 7 days, apart from that time I did. But apart from Japan and then recently. But normally I know we only go for like four days.
In fact, like last year, you did like 3 holidays in 1 year.
Did I?
Yeah. You kept going on holiday. Like it was either last year or the year before. You just kept going on fucking holiday.
It depends if you count like going to Cape Town as a holiday.
I mean, yes.
I didn't choose to go to Cape. Well, I did choose. I was invited to Cape Town and I attended.
But you weren't kidnapped and forced to go to Cape Town.
That's not the definition of a holiday. Somewhere you go without being kidnapped.
I don't think you going to Cape Town counts as holiday, but me going to Australia does count as holiday because I've extended the time out to spend more time there to actually look around, and I'm taking Warren so that I can actually enjoy looking around, whereas you went on your own, and
I enjoyed
you did look around and stuff, but it doesn't feel as holiday if you're just like looking around while you're there rather than making an event of looking around.
Yeah, I think I went like Thursday to Monday, and most of that was the weekend conference. On holiday. New York will be a holiday because I am going for longer. But yeah, maybe I went for a couple of holidays last year. I forget. I don't know when I go on holiday. I don't know. I don't think I went on 3. It was 2: Berlin and Cape Town, if you count Cape Town.
Berlin, that's where you went last year. We were literally having a conversation recently about didn't they go to Italy last year? Don't they always go to Italy? I was like, I'm pretty sure they've only been to Italy once in the last like 5 years or so.
We went to Rome after just after we got married,
and then
we've just been
which you've not actually said yet.
So we went to Sorrento for a we which was good. It was interesting. It's like a nice hot kind of on the side of mountains kind of thing.
Okay.
So we were able to go to... Yeah, we love a bit of mountains.
Okay.
Love a bit of mountain. We went to Vesuvius and climbed up Vesuvius.
Right.
So it was the 3rd volcano I have stood on, which is not bad going, like a hat-trick of volcanoes. This one was actively smoking. So
I rode a camel on a volcano once.
Did you? Which volcano?
It was a volcano in Lanzarote when I was about 7 years old.
Nice.
I can't want to go to Lanzarote.
Smoking?
It was, I think. Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah.
We got to the very top. Literally walked all the way up Vesuvius. Yeah. Got to the top where it flattens off, and you're like, oh, it's smoking. Is that normal?
Was it smoking or smoke? Was it just a little bit of gentle smoke?
No, it was like...
Or was it?
Well, there was one little bit of a massive crater. There was one little bit that was like...
If it was a big plume, it might have just been vaping.
It could have been vaping. It did smell of cinnamon. So that's that. No, so we went up Vesuvius. We went to Pompeii. Pompeii is fucking massive. Jesus, it's big. Like the Pompeii, as in the it's the ruin.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's the size of a town, and not like it's like a town, but like a town,
right?
Where everything's just wrecked. But it's massive. We spent like 5 hours walking around.
I mean, you'd think they'd tidy up. You
think they would tidy up?
But, you know, fair enough.
I was saying to Nicola, because we've looked around the whole thing now, and we probably wouldn't go back again. But I said, if you do go back in 10 years, it'll be even older then. So it'll be even more impressive. But yeah, that's really, really cool. Pompeii is kind of exactly what you think, but it's so big. It's so big. But we did get a bit pissed off because we got there, and as soon as you got out the train station at Pompeii, there's a guy there going, up the stairs for your tickets to Pompeii. And so we were like, really? Okay. So we went up the stairs, tickets to Pompeii, and then paid €17 for a ticket to Pompeii. Then walked around the corner and down the street a little bit to the entrance. And I was like, hang on, why do we get our tickets at the train station when the entrance is here? Bollocks. And it should have been €13. And they've just got like a tourist office thing where someone set up a private tourist company. So if you do ever go to Pompeii, don't listen to the guy going, up your stairs to Pompeii. When it isn't up the stairs to Pompeii, it's up the stairs to be scalped €4 on a ticket, on an identical ticket to Pompeii that should cost you €13.
That's a disgrace.
That was a disgrace. But Pompeii was great. We went to Ercolano, which is like a smaller version of Pompeii, but it's pretty interesting. Good to like have a little bit of a look around. On the way back from Ercolano, so Sorrento is you have to go for like 45 minutes on the train to get to Ercolano.
Right.
At which point you then took a half-hour bus to the top of Vesuvius, like to the bit of Vesuvius that you start walking up.
Yeah.
So you've kind of done that, and then you come back to Ercolano, look around Ercolano a bit, get the train back. So there's kind of like a decent amount of commuting going on. On the train back.
You're right, this wasn't a holiday.
No, yeah. Well, I'll tell you a bit more about commuting in a minute. But I stood there with a book on the train all the way because I was reading a lot. Is it normal? I read 6 books on holiday. I was away for 7 days.
It depends on the kind of holiday you go on. Like if I were going on a relaxing beach holiday, which I don't really do very often, but if I were to spend like a full solid few days like just lounging around by a pool, then I would probably get through that many books.
But we didn't spend any time. We didn't even go in the pool.
But it was gone on a holiday where you've gone and walked around stuff and looked at stuff. Yeah, that's not normal.
But we've commuted.
But if you've done a lot of travelling, you're not driving, then maybe
I was half an hour at Vesuvius.
So
a lot of that,
train,
I'm reading a book. Half an hour back, reading a book. Stood on the train on the way back, 45 minutes from Colano. Stood reading a book, rereading Them, John Ronson. Haven't read that in 10 years.
Right.
Ages in a slightly funny way. Not sure all of it hangs together, and it's quite interesting as he talks about the guy from the KKK trying to whitewash, ironically enough, but trying to change the face of the KKK to make it much more friendly, because that's what they need to do. They make it much more mainstream and do things that aren't KKK related to kind of ingratiate themselves into society. I thought 10 years later, that sort of worked, didn't it? Really, that seems to have paid off in many ways.
That is true.
So I was rereading Them and stood with Nicola on the train, and then a guy comes and stands right behind Nicola, like close enough that he's almost touching her.
Right.
And he's talking to a guy who stood in the middle of the little train bit that we're on. And there's another guy, it's like the middle bit between, the seats are either side, and you've got the middle bit, which is a standing area.
Okay.
And there's a third guy who's talking to me who stood between the seats at the next little bit. And then the guy who stood in the middle sort of steps closer to me, and then the guy from the seats comes a bit further over. And Nicola was like, this guy stood behind me. He's standing very close behind me. This is dodgy. And I was looking and I thought, oh, this is dodgy. They're trying to rob us. These 3 are trying to rob us. They're he's blocking you from turning around. And if you do turn around, he might try and pickpocket you, but you've got nothing to pickpocket. But he's trying to block you in. His mate down there is blocking us from going down the seats, and he's going to move in. And he must have clocked on the fact that I've got my sunglasses around my neck.
Yeah.
So took those off in the pocket.
Yeah.
And they're sort of slowly moving further and further in, and I was just just watching them stalk us going in for the rob. And so we just sort of waited long enough for them to be moving towards us. And then we walked past them and went down because he moved further in, and we got past him and walked down the street.
Why do you attract crime on
holiday? I don't know. I think, to be fair, I suspect that train is there's a lot of tourists. Probably targeted for it. So Nicola was a bit worried, and I just thought it was quite amusing because their game was so obvious. And it's quite nice to watch the con happening and be like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to rob us here, aren't you? All right, guys. Yeah, fair enough. So that was that day.
Because you get some people have got come to bed eyes, or fuck me shoes. Well, you've got rob me sunglasses.
I've got rob me sunglasses. I've got a mug me mouth. And then so we went to Pompeii. That was a good half an hour on the train. Bit more commuting there. Then we went to Capri, the island of Capri. So half an hour on the ferry to get there. Then you've got to take a bus from Capri town to Anacapri, a different place in Capri.
Okay.
That bus comes every 10 minutes.
One pronounced Capri and one pronounced Capri?
I think they're all pronounced Capri, but it's weird to say Anacapri. Sounds a bit weird.
Right.
Whereas we always call the island Capri, but I've never said the word Anacapri before in English. So it was
okay, fair enough.
So the bus comes every 10 minutes. Wait half an hour for that. Got on that. Got to Anacapri. Got on a chairlift. So it was 20 minutes on the bus up there. Got on a chairlift. That's 13 minutes to get to the very, very top of the mountain on Anacapri. Look about. Yeah, this is nice. Half an hour later, come back down, 13 minutes. Wait for the bus from Anacapri back into Capri town. Comes every 10 minutes. An hour later, still stood there. I was like, fuck me. Then half an hour back on the ferry. It's we've spent 4 hours today waiting for transport. What the hell is going on? And I wasn't even reading then. And then we went to the Amalfi Coast, and it was to go around to Amalfi. That's an hour and a half on the bus. And then once we're there from Amalfi, we'll go up to Ravello. Ravello was beautiful, but that's another half an hour on the bus.
Have you thought about holidays that are better connected?
Well, this is the thing. Sorrento is the place, is the connection. They say you go to Sorrento because it's so easy to access everywhere from there. It's not fucking easy. We spent 4 hours a day commuting. When we went to Amalfi that day, we spent 2 hours of the day not on a coach. We spent an hour in Ravello, an hour in Amalfi. Great, of the 6 hours that since we left our hotel room, 4 of them have been travelling. So you wonder why I got through quite so many books. So I read Them by John Ronson. I read Elephant in the Room by John Ronson, which barely counts because it's very short. I read Hack Attack, Nick Davies, which is very worth reading.
Okay.
I read Enemy of the People, which is a book I bought in South Africa. Having spent some time, having spent a weekend in South Africa, thinking this is really interesting, I want to learn more about it. And it was all about how Jacob Zuma's government effectively stole huge amounts of money from the state resources in collusion with a couple of businessmen from India. That's a really interesting story that you think, if this was happening in like France or Italy or somewhere closer to Europe, this would be massive, massive, massive news. It's the reason Bell Pottinger, the PR firm, went under, basically, is because they were stoking racial hatred in South Africa, working for the Zuma government.
Yeah, well, now that gets you a job in the Trump White House.
It does get you a job in the Trump. Maybe Bell Pottinger will be back in the US. So yeah, I've spent the last week largely reading, largely on buses, but also walking like 7 miles a day up mountains.
That's a disgrace. Alice, you'd been up to anything fun?
We did some lots of walking as well.
We did do our own set of lots of walking. That's true. We did the Skeptics charity walk.
The Skeptics charity walk, which was good. It was really nice weather. It was a slightly less nice walk than usual because of the bloody marathon.
That
was awful
marathon.
timing.
Jesus Christ,
that was unlucky.
And we only found out about it like a week before. It's like, oh shit, we clashed with a marathon.
The problem is, every year I book our summer schedule of events. We have like 3 events in the summer that we do. One of them is booked. The date is set for us. That's Liverpool Pride that we just turn up at. But then the other 2 we have to pick dates, which is hard because we have to pick dates that all of us on the board can do and that suits people who are actually going to attend. That's going to be nice weather because both of them are outside. That's going to not clash with Liverpool, which has with Liverpool events which are very common in the summer in Liverpool. There's an event every weekend in Liverpool.
Yeah, there is.
So every year I try and do a bit of a Google to see what's on, but Liverpool doesn't advertise its events very well. No. And our walk was the day after the royal wedding. So every time you Google for that weekend for events on, it's all about the royal wedding.
Yeah. Although mainly royal wedding in Liverpool, it was events that were like, fuck the royal wedding. Let's all get together in sound and make a massive donation to a food bank, which was happening in sound on the day of the royal wedding.
But so we didn't spot that there was. I didn't spot that there was the marathon on.
It was the first marathon, wasn't it? The first rock and roll marathon. Or
I think we've done the rock and roll marathon in Liverpool before, but I don't know when it is and whether it moves or like we change the date for our walk every year. We did it a little bit earlier this year than usual, so. But still, we did it.
We had to change the route, but it wasn't as nice a route, but it was still a good route.
It's still a nice route. We still got to walk by the Mersey for probably about 2/3 of it, which was nice.
We did. Some of it smelled more fishy than others. There were several blokes standing there fishing with their rods leaning up against the no fishing sign. That was
nice.
You always get that along the Liverpool waterfront.
That is good. That is good.
That was good. That was quality. And then we walked from Otterspool Promenade up to Speke Hall.
We did.
And Speke Hall was
beautiful. Beautiful view of Speke Hall coming through the back of the gardens, which was really nice.
We did. It was spectacular. It was
found a pretty little pond as well, which was good.
And we didn't get sunburned.
We didn't. We had a donation contingent on us not getting sunburned from our listener Bevan, who said, "I'm going to take you up." She helped us meet our target. She gave us a donation that took us up to our target. And it was contingent on the fact that we wore sunscreen. So we did. We did. And we didn't get sunburnt for the first year ever. This is our 5th year of doing it. First year ever, we haven't got sunburnt.
And the thing, I double sun creamed. I put some sun cream on my head and then a hat as well.
Yeah.
Oh. I doubled up on the sun protection, and of course my usual kind of factor 800 sun cream that I wear on the rest of my body, which is called a suit,
a full-on suit,
which helps. So that was good, but we met our target. But donations for that are still open.
They are still open, and we would like to exceed our target. We usually exceed our target, so it'd be really nice. It's for a great cause. For GiveWell, who not only research charities to make sure that they're giving money to the most efficient charities that are actually going to make good use of their resources, but they also pick some really solid charities, so a lot of it goes to malaria nets and deworming programs because it can have the biggest impact on the largest number of people. So,
and I love that as a concept, the kind of evidence-based distribution, what's going to actually make the most impact for the most people and do the most good. I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, which is why I actually, I haven't mentioned this, but I did get in touch with GiveWell because we're having to fundraise through a different route to normal. We're having to crowdfund rather than do it as a Just Giving fundraiser because GiveWell aren't on Just Giving as a fundraiser. So I contacted them to ask if there was any easier way of doing it than doing that.
Yes.
And they got back in touch with me and said, we don't do it that way, but we appreciate the feedback and it's something we might look into in the future.
Sure.
But then the woman who emailed me back also pointed out there are lots of charities on our list of top charities who do take donations that way. You could donate to one of those instead. I was like, no, I want our money to go to GiveWell because you also, need the support. But they were like, no, just give it to these charities. Very much like wanting to prioritize giving it to the charities. So that was really nice. They're a great group. We've got a little bit more to discuss on the Flat Earth Conference.
Hey!
We have to get our money's worth out of this because we did go. So
trust me, the several hours we've spent discussing this on the show, and it has been several hours at this stage.
It has, yeah.
Is nothing compared to the several hours we spent actually at the event. God, it was the most exhausting weekend ever. The final part of the weekend, the final part that we actually stayed for, because we did leave a tiny bit early. We didn't leave a tiny bit early. We left bang on time for when it was supposed to finish, but obviously it ran late. Yeah. So we left before the last thing, but on time. It was a debate between flat Earth researchers and some physicists. Just to set the scene, this was late on the Sunday. At this point, we've been in the hotel room in Birmingham for something like 18 hours.
Good God.
With a brief break for dinner the night before and an overnight stay in another hotel in Birmingham, all after a 2-hour plus drive down to the convention far too early on a Saturday morning. We'd been sat in an overly warm, overly crowded, overly dark conference room with no fresh air, sitting on standard hotel conference room chairs, so cripplingly uncomfortable seats. We'd both been mainlining coffee to try and keep focus during the talks. Like, I was jittering by the end. The only food I'd been able to eat had been like really mega processed carbs. Like, they had very limited availability on food. So there was fruit. I had some fruit. And then at like the morning break, there was like OT cookies. And then for lunch, there was basically a plate of chips, a plate of pasta, and a plate of noodles. Like, it was all processed carbs. Yeah. So all I'd eaten all weekend was processed carbs. And we'd been sat in this horribly hot room the whole time that was dark. By this point, like, I was feeling pretty horrific. I think you were just about hanging on. But I was like shaky and lightheaded and exhausted. The night before, I'd actually made the mistake of taking some painkillers when I was already like jittery and hadn't eaten properly and was properly tired. And I got really high and spacey and couldn't make that mistake again. I was like properly high on painkillers. So I had to survive painkiller free for the Sunday.
Yeah, you were really annoying. Really annoying.
Some people pay good money to be high at a flat Earth convention. That's the kind of thing you can't buy with just regular street drugs.
It was the worst possible timing because I'd taken them towards the end of the event just before dinner. So we had to leave the venue, go to the other hotel for dinner. But I was in charge of where the other hotel was. I'd booked the other hotel. I had all of the information and none of the ability to actually get us there. No, and Marsh doesn't deal well with logistical stress. And we didn't have that long to get there and back.
Yeah, especially when you were like, it's like a 10-minute walk around the corner. And then you took us the wrong route because you realised it was 10 minutes by a car. And so it was it's a 10-minute drive around the corner and we were walking around the roads of Birmingham.
I was really, really high.
You were. And you were just like meandering around like, come on, we can't miss the cosmic egg.
Ironically, you took the route the wrong way around the planet, thus demonstrating it was a globe.
Very much so.
On the way to the hotel.
So I didn't make... it's painkillers I take fairly routine. I have other painkillers that I don't take because they make me high.
Sure.
I didn't take those painkillers because I didn't want to get high. I took the safe painkillers that I always take, but took them on very limited sleep, having eaten very poorly, being utterly exhausted and having mainlined coffee all day. I must have had about 8 or 9 cups of coffee that day. So
all I've got in my head now is the Afro Man song going, I was going to go to a flat Earth convention, but then I got high.
It's all right. I got de-spaced during dinner and I was fine for the cosmic egg.
You landed again.
Was going to walk to the hotel for lunch, but then I got high.
But we were super interested to see how the debate between physicists and the flat earthers would go, so we had to hang on for what ended up being a few more hours. The debate was introduced by Chris Richardson, who's the editor of a quarterly magazine, iScience, which is the Imperial College London's magazine. And he introduced the debate by discussing the scientific method and how observations become theories, become facts, and why he believes in science and testing hypotheses. Chris had put together a group of 3 physicists, Tom, George and Luke. Tom is a second-year PhD student from Cardiff University and is an extragalactic planet physicist. Luke is a first-year astrophysics PhD student from Imperial College London who works on exoplanets, and George is a first-year astrophysicist PhD student who works on dark matter. Each of the 3 students introduced a few ideas. Tom talked about Occam's razor.
Yeah, good.
And said that there's a kernel at the centre of science that says we demand that you be logical. I liked that he used kernel after Iru had spent such a long time trying to explain what what a kernel was, what a nucleus was, and not misunderstanding the definition of the word kernel. Then Luke talked about research red flags. It seemed like he had identified the flat earth reliance on weird sources like YouTube and was trying to head that off at the bat. He listed red flags including lacking proper methodological details, lacking references, relying on videos with confusing perspectives or derived from biased content creators. And he warned the flat earthers about the difference between scientific skepticism and denialism. And said, don't rely on YouTube and bloggers. Google is your friend.
Yeah, that got a lot of derision from the audience. Like, oh, Google is your friend, is it? We don't trust Google, we trust YouTube.
Yeah, there was laughter, ridicule, boos. Somebody shouted, "Get off!" But it was given slightly less good-naturedly than it was taken. But it was given mostly good-naturedly at this point. And then George rounded up by talking about skepticism in science and how a scientist must try to disprove their own findings in order to be rigorous and scientific.
There was a lovely point on the denialism thing where they said that you can't just reject things that you don't like because then you're a denier, it's denialism, and then you know better than the people who deny evolution. Oh. And the audience went, evolution? What, monkey men? Is that
we come back to that. That wasn't at that stage, but yeah.
Oh, was it? Sorry, yeah.
I think at this stage, I had been initially worried, having spoken to flat earthers, that the physicists who might not have had much experience speaking to conspiracy theorists would have ended up overwhelmed by the sheer volume of conspiracy theory you often get engulfed by when you have these conversations. But actually, these opening comments were really strong. The 3 physicists came across as respectful of the flat earthers, which is important if you're in that situation, open to learning while still holding confidence in their own views and the science in general. They were all really confident speakers and had a level of kind of humorous humility that brought the audience on side pretty early on. Also turns out that George is a listener to the show, so we should take a moment to say hello to George.
Okay, now I feel awkward.
Not half as awkward as when we met him. I was sort of very quietly, like under my voice, saying like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm a skeptic, so I'm on your side." And they were like, "Sorry, what?" I'm from a skeptic society. Don't make a big deal out of it.
He's like, "Oh, which one?"
Yeah.
Listen to the show. The panel of flat earthers comprised of Darren Nesbitt, Dave Murphy, Sean Connors, and Iru. So you can understand why it ran a little long. But Gary, despite intending to remain impartial throughout, did just want to jump in on the problem with Google. Gary says Google, Wikipedia and NASA all give different distances for stars in Orion's belt, which is something that we had mentioned before. And therefore, this is proof that they're all lying to us. But Tom pointed out the simple explanation for this is that the distances are harder to interpret when you're inside the Milky Way, looking at something also inside the Milky Way, because you're looking through multiple arms of a spiral galaxy, which adds a layer of distortion. So there are inconsistencies between our measurements for that reason, rather than because Google, Wikipedia and NASA are lying to us.
But none of our measurements are it doesn't exist. It's holes in a firmament that is actually quite nearby.
And that was the thing I think with Gary, because Gary was he wasn't on the panel. He was the independent arbiter between the two, but he was not independent.
No.
But he did keep reminding us how independent he was.
Yes.
So yeah,
yes.
I'm staying entirely impartial on this. But what I would like to say is,
yeah, he failed quite miserably on being impartial. But
bless him.
I think he was genuinely trying.
He was trying. It's just he couldn't
he
recognise what impartial was. Yeah.
Yes. And he got a little bit carried away. I think he was. I think he told us over and over and over again that he was super excited to be hosting this debate. I think he took credit for the idea of the debate, which I'm not sure whether it was entirely his idea, because Chris, the journalist who got in touch with them, had kind of talked about approaching the flat earthers to do something like this. But he was super proud of the fact that they were doing this debate and mentioned it at every possible point, including taking a brief interlude during the debate to ask everybody what they thought about the idea of the debate and how well it was going.
It really was. It was like, can I just pause now to say, isn't this great? Wasn't this a great idea? Shouldn't we be doing this? Like, yes, do it. Let's do it. Let's get back to it. Let's not. Yeah. Oh, that was. Yeah. Can I have any comments from people about how well you think this is going?
Which, to be fair, the audience took that as an excuse to then have comments on the actual debate itself and bring it back to points related to the debate.
But I mean, you're probably going to
yeah.
come to that as well. But a lot of them were just using it as a point to just make a comment, which largely often went to berating the physicists.
Yes, of course.
There was a good 20-minute chunk in the middle where I was like, oh, come on, can we not have this debate, please? Because we were promised a debate, and now it's just the audience shouting at these students.
Some physicists. Yeah. Darren Nesbitt was the first flat earther to respond. He pointed out that Chris, the journalist, had said, we make observations and then we get theories and then we get facts. Darren said, I picked up on that straight away. Shouldn't the last two be the other way round? We make observations, and if they're repeated observations and verified, that makes them fact. And then you develop a theory from the fact. You actually said it the other way around. We find that's what the heliocentric theory does a lot. They've got a lot of theory for this and then decide to go get the facts, which is it's frustrating in how much he misunderstands how science works. Yes, you make observations, but then you have to hypothesize what that means and how that works. And then you have to try and disprove the hypothesis. And that's what the facts are. That's the getting the facts bit, is the trying to disprove the theory that you've made, the hypothesis that you've made. Yeah,
I mean, the simple version of that is if you've got a string of numbers, you can figure out what the pattern of that numbers is, turn that into a formula, and then use that formula to say, well, if we test it with these numbers, does it hold true? Yes, it holds true. Right, then this formula was correct. You know,
exactly,
you've got your theory in the middle, and then your facts is what you're putting in to make sure that it was correct.
Come back to strings and numbers later.
Will we now? Oh, okay. God, it's been a while since you've done a story. You haven't had a chance to throw forward for ages.
He explained that the flat Earth community have rejected. So he said, what we have rejected is the vast universe. We don't accept these distances are so huge. We think the stars and galaxies are very, very close and very, very small.
Okay.
That's what the flat Earth theory is.
On the basis of
that episode of Father Ted.
I don't really watch Father Ted, but I've seen that snippet because it's obviously an incredibly famous snippet, and it came into my head at least 15 times during that entire weekend.
Yes.
Because it fundamentally is a misunderstanding of perception and how close things are.
Yeah, I don't understand distance or scale.
Yes.
That is the strapline of the Flat Earth Convention.
Well, as I was walking home yesterday, I saw a bee fly over my head and kind of went, oh, it's a bee flying over my head. And it turns out it wasn't a bee that was nearby. It was a bird that was far away.
Really?
And it was, it's a bird. Oh, no, it's a bird. And actually, it's flying over a house. Okay. And I thought it was a bee about 2 feet from my face.
Nice.
You didn't think it odd that you couldn't hear it?
That's it's
a stealth bee.
Okay.
I walked the dog down the dock yesterday and heard a very loud buzzing noise and spent far too long trying to find where this... I figured out it was a drone. It sounded like a drone. But the drone that I could see looked like a plane in the sky. I was like, but that's a plane. That's too far away to be a drone.
When we were on the charity walk, we walked past a guy with a drone.
Yeah.
He was standing in his back garden holding a thing, looking up in the sky. No idea where the drone... Couldn't see it. He might have just been a man standing there holding a radio control.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't see a fucking drone anywhere. But it was like the big fucking drone remote control with a phone mounted on it with a screen, and he's going...
If they get out of range, do they just drop?
I hope so.
That'd be good.
They must have planned that in.
What, like returns?
It must depend on the drone. Like, if you've got a super mega expensive photographer's drone, I would imagine there's something built into it to like bring it back to you.
I thought you meant like the ones that are bombing Iraq. If you've got the US Air Force's drones bombing Iraq, it'll probably be all right. It'll probably come back all right.
Darren asked, if the atmosphere is held in by gravity, why can't it hold on to a helium balloon?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The whole stuff about the atmosphere was really interesting, and the answers from the physicists, I thought, were very good for being put together very quickly.
Yes.
Because it's worth pointing out that they mentioned that they'd put together a list of questions.
And the physicists had the questions ahead of time and had prepared answers to these questions.
And they've been back and forth over them to make sure that this is the area that, and you're sure about this? Right, right, got the whole list of questions. And I don't think they touched on those questions in the debate.
They did, and it might have been the discussion about it might have related to, and I think actually one of the physicists tried to bring it back to the question that they'd been asked and related to the question that they'd been asked. But yeah, very early on in the debate, he actually ripped up the questions, like theatrically ripped up the questions.
Okay,
so
but it wasn't actually the questions; it was a different piece of paper.
Yeah,
it was a lovely kind of moment of slapstick, like, oh, we might as well not use these. I was joking. These are the questions over here.
Right.
Cheers, guys.
He talked about the Kepler telescope being built in 2009 and that in 6 years it saw 4,000 exoplanets, to which he said, which, let's face it, is a little irregular. Now, I have absolutely no idea if he thinks 4,000 in 6 years is a really high number or a really low number.
Yeah,
because it literally could be either way. And he was saying this number is irregular. And I think what he was saying is that seems a really high number, but it's a fucking massive universe.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing is, we didn't have anything like that up there before.
Yeah. So of course it's going to find lots and lots of undiscovered things in a very short space of time.
It's like, well, you suddenly in the last year you found all these things. Yeah, we weren't really looking before. Well, you didn't find anything before that. Yeah, we weren't looking. So it's no surprise that we found lots of them once we started. We found more of them once we started looking than before we were really looking.
It's like landing on Earth when you've never been to Earth before and saying, look at all these different species of animals. I've categorized thousands of them in the space of a year. Well, that's because there's thousands of species of animals on it.
Although that bee that you categorised turns out to have been a bird that was just a little bit further away.
Double counted that one in many ways.
He talked about a distrust of the mainstream media and academia and said, which we know to have distorted and perverted the truth. And he talked about false flags and how we should use all sources. I think in his defense of YouTube, that should count as one of the sources. Then Dave Murphy responded to the initial comments from the physicists. His response to Occam's razor was that the simplest explanation is when we look at the sea, it's flat.
Also, his point, have you got this here about his point about Occam's razor? We say, well, you look at Occam's razor, you said it needs to be a simple answer. But if you look at the equations for how gravity works, they don't look simple at all. If you look at the equations for how all these things work, the equations look really, really complex.
Long and complicated.
Yeah, they're not simple at all, so they can't be right. It's like, no, you don't know what we mean by simple. You don't know what is meant by simple. Well, because,
and this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how things work. Because he's saying, well, when we look at the sea, it's flat, that's a simple answer. But the opposing simple answer is when we look at the horizon, when we look at the data we have about the Earth, it's a globe.
Yes.
Yes, you can throw away a simple word, but if you try and turn that into an equation, it's gonna. But they're both going to be long and complicated, and the Earth being flat has to rely on a lot of things that aren't shown to be true. Has to rely on a lot of, probably, maybe it's this, it's that.
It's a misunderstanding of Occam's razor. Simple in the context of Occam's razor means making the fewest assumptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas to say the Earth is flat, okay, that seems like a simple explanation on the face of it, but it makes a terrific number of assumptions about fucking cosmic eggs and domes and planets and all that kind of nonsense.
12 pillars because God likes the number 12.
Yeah. There's a terrific number of implicit assumptions in the sea is flat because it looks flat.
Yeah, just because you can say one word doesn't mean it's a simpler explanation.
And things like planets with retrograde orbits. When you we were building all sorts of huge, complex models. That model, when we had a kind of geocentric view of the universe, we were building these huge, complex models of wheels within wheels that made the planets move backwards and forwards, and trying to model how we observed things like, Mars and Jupiter and Saturn moving in the sky. And it wasn't until we realized that actually it was a heliocentric universe. It's like,
that simplifies everything.
It's
science is
suddenly
just basically,
just works nicely.
Oh shit, yeah, that'd do it.
Yeah.
That'd solve that problem that we're having, because that's the simpler way of doing it. We just haven't thought of it yet, because we're not always as smart as nature is putting these things into place.
What you're saying is the answer's always in nature, and nature doesn't lie.
I don't have a problem with that as a premise. The problem is the flat earthers failed to put that into practice. They're like, it's the answers are in nature and nature doesn't lie, but failing to understand that humans perceiving nature will get things wrong because humans are...
The answer's in nature doesn't lie, therefore the universe is an egg.
It's also important to remember that Laurie is in nature, and Laurie does lie.
Does he lie?
I bet Laurie's told a lie.
Oh, I don't think Laurie's a liar. I think Laurie's a pretty truthful person.
To say somebody is truthful and to say that they...
I can't think of many instances where I think Laurie would have lied. Maybe it was never published in Nature.
That's the big lie.
It's been a massive ruse.
Verifiable.
It's been a massive ruse. He's faking Nature. He broke into Nature data server.
I did look up Laurie's paper in Nature at one point. I downloaded the PDF. I've got it. It's good. I'll read it at one point. It's in a folder with Alice's thesis.
I was going to say, you've also got a PDF of my thesis that you've never read.
That I've not got around to reading yet.
Marcia's read my thesis.
One day
several
I'll
times.
have time. Didn't you go through and just put a load of jokes into Alice's thesis?
I went through and put a load of commas into Alice's thesis, and then to amuse myself with how boring I found it because I'm not a scientist, I put a load of jokes in as well.
There were lots of jokes down the side in comments.
Good.
And a lot of commas.
A lot of
Turns
extra
out
commas.
I'm not very good at using commas. You do the same. I've sent you stuff of mine to proof before, and you've just put in loads of commas.
Comma.
Turns out when you talk really quickly, you don't need to pause for breath. So,
or thought.
Then I did have notes on Newton's theory of gravity being long and complicated, but we've covered it. Then we had Sean Connors, who I don't think we talked much about what he talked about because he didn't really have very much to say.
No, we did cover it.
We talked about it, but I don't think we went into huge amounts of detail.
Music today isn't as good as it used to be. Kids today, get off my lawn, etc.
It was just a bit, it was pretty much that. But he introduced himself as Sean Connors School of Life, which got a huge round of applause.
It did get a
massive
huge round of applause. Oh, God, there's nothing more annoying than someone says, I studied at the University of Life. It's, fuck's sake.
Has anyone considered actually starting the University of Life so you can start suing people who didn't attend your university? So I'm afraid you didn't come to this institution, mate.
Yeah. Leicester Institute for Fiscal Education, something like that. So you were not here.
And then he spent a long time, and this is basically all he said. He spent a long time talking about a meeting that happened apparently in Zurich in 2015, which I've Googled around a bit, and I think he probably meant a meeting that happened in Munich in 2015.
Munich, okay. Zurich, yeah, it's the
close
same
enough.
thing, isn't it?
They both end in ich.
They do.
Which he said that at this meeting, they said the purpose of the scientific method is to defend the integrity of physics. Gotcha.
Okay.
That was basically the crux of his point.
He didn't really say what that meeting was.
No.
Or who had that meeting.
No.
And why they get to speak for all of science.
No. It was really hard to try and figure out which meeting he meant. I think I have got it.
And what meeting do you think it was?
It's this. I haven't written the title down of the meeting, but it was a meeting that happened in 2015 in Munich, which was a relatively big meeting of lots of organisations coming together. That there was a bit of a media outsplash about it at the time, which is why I think that's
and it's to defend the integrity of physics.
Yes,
but integrity can have multiple meanings.
And this is the thing.
One is
for
reputation,
me.
and the other is internal consistency.
Yeah. To defend the integrity of physics is to say, you're using the scientific method to rigorously check that physics works.
Yeah, integrity like structural integrity or hull integrity. It's
exactly.
We've got to make sure that physics is structurally sound, and we use the scientific method to do that.
Use the scientific method to make sure nobody puts something into physics that does not carry the integrity of physics.
Yeah.
But that's not what he took it to mean. He took it to mean that there you go, physicists, they're all bastards. Then we had Iru for a very long time.
Yeah. For a very long time and a very absence of question mark.
To be fair to Iru, I think they'd originally planned to have the kind of traditional debate format where everybody has their initial statements. And so I think he was discussing his initial statement, but they'd kind of thrown that out the window. And instead of, Gary had said at the beginning of the Flat Earthers speaking in response to the physicists, he'd said, I think instead of going to our prepared statements, we'll just respond to what the physicists have said.
Yeah, and also there was a point where, like, the flat earther would say something, and then they would. I think the physicists, did they not even say, "Do you want us to?" We can't really wait for everyone to have done theirs because there's a lot in there. So can we respond to that, and then we'll move on to the next bit if that's all right.
But I think Iru had just misunderstood that that's what was happening, so had gone into his prepared statement, which of course it was Iru, so it was very, very long.
Yeah, he once again misunderstood this concept of time.
But he talked about how some flat earthers are scientists, and then said a lot of YouTubers take the information from books and other scientists. So it's science, therefore.
Good, yes.
And then asked the question that he ended up asking was how do you prove that water. I feel really bad reading it verbatim because his English wasn't great and it sounds like I'm taking the piss, but that's verbatim what he said. I'm just gonna pass it into full English. So he's asked, how do you prove that water sticks to the outside of the container? And then said all that nonsense of the globe Earth started with Eratosthenes. He just wake up one day and decide was basically what his question was. What
aside from all those experiments he did, but sure,
yeah,
we didn't have enough wells.
Woke up one day and decided.
Yeah. The thing about water not
to do all those experiments.
It struck me the other day, water never sticks to a sphere. Water will never ever bend around a sphere. You'll never see water bending around a sphere. And they always say that, and they always use a spirit level to prove that things are flat, because water always just finds its level. So you use a spirit level, you put it down, look, it's flat, and they were selling spirit levels. We gave you a spirit level.
Yeah.
If you look at a spirit level, what you see is water bending around a sphere because there's a fucking bubble in the middle of it. And if you look closely at the bubble, it's like, oh, there's the water curving around something because when there is a force in the middle that will affect the way that water is moving or that water settles, it will settle around a curve very, very clearly. Mm-hmm. So water can settle around a curve if there's a force being applied to it. But your own argument is self-defeating if you look at the apparatus you're using to make an argument.
We will come back to apparatus.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the initial statements from the physicists, and then the kind of rebuttal / questions / statements from the flat earthers, and then we kind of got into the meat and bones of the actual debate. So George jumped in at this point, and this is where he kind of lost the audience a little bit. He was concerned by the use of just a theory, to which he said, that's the rhetoric of evolution deniers, the rhetoric of science deniers, the rhetoric of people who do not understand science. Which is a perfectly valid point, not the right forum to make it. There was an intake of breath, there were ripples and oohs from the audience and mutters of even Monkey Man from the evolution denying audience. It wasn't a nice atmosphere just for that split second.
There were a few moments where the atmosphere wasn't great, and that was one of them. But I do think it's still very interesting that at a flat Earth convention, so many people there would deny evolution of all the conspiracies, of all the pseudosciences that you'd expect there. I still think the evolution thing is a really incongruous one until you realise the massive religious element of flat Earthism. Like the fact that loads of people come to flat Earth because they are religious, water's above, water's below, four corners of the Earth, etc., etc.
Well, I had a conversation on my doorstep once with one of those door-to-door religious. I don't know if it was Jehovah's Witness specifically, but one of those kind of door-to-door. Oh, I told you the good news about Jesus.
A door-to-door religious salesman
type people. Yeah, it's trying to sell me religion on the doorstep.
Yeah,
that didn't work. He went for encyclopedias, but
there's a Bill Bailey joke about the hardest job he ever had was a door-to-door door salesman. It was like, can I interest you? Oh, I see you've already got one.
But he pointed out to me, I kind of, I'm not convinced the Bible, blah, blah, blah. And his argument to me was that the Bible, you could tell the Bible is a true and accurate word of God because it had information, it's got information in it that we didn't know at the time that we do know now. And one of the things that it has is the spherical earth is described in the Bible. One, it's not true that we didn't know the earth was spherical at the time the Bible was written.
Yeah.
That goes back to the ancient Greeks. But when I looked into it in more detail, I went, all right, that's interesting. I'll look into that. The Hebrew word that was used is the circle of the earth, which the apologists are now saying, well, they meant globe. They meant the sphere, and that's God giving information that science hadn't yet discovered, which actually isn't really the case. But of course, the flat earthers would go, well, it is a circle.
Yeah,
you know, it is a flat disc.
It's a flat 2D circle. Yeah,
you know, and the Bible says it's a flat disc.
Yeah.
Because there is like a Hebrew word for ball. That could have been the word that was used in the Bible, but it wasn't. The word used was the word for circle. And it's interesting how, depending on what you want the answer to be, you will interpret that passage either as a ball or disc.
Tom then points out that we can never prove anything with absolute certainty. What I found quite interesting at this point was that the flat earthers were fully on side with the "we can never prove anything with absolute certainty" comments. They very much switched between either strongly disagreeing with the physicists or using what the physicists said to support their own points, which felt very odd because the points that the physicists were making were justified equally in either case. They just cherry picked which ones that they used, and obviously that's completely consistent with how they were making arguments throughout the entire weekend. But it was an interesting highlight of that in action.
I think one of the things I thought the physicists did very, very well was, as they were making their points, they were passing those points through a friendliness filter.
Yes.
To be like, okay, so I'm saying this, but I want you to understand this, and I want you to try and be on side with this. So here's what I want to say, and I'm going to soften it in this shape so it's a bit more saleable to you, rather than what the flat earthers were quite often doing, which was like, right, I've got this point, and I'm going to grandstand that point to be as showy as possible and force it through as possible. I know Dave Marsh did that later on.
Yeah, Dave Murphy. So we've got this example right here. So the physicists were asked about why a plane flying in the Earth's atmosphere doesn't need to adjust its nose in order to maintain a level artificial horizon. So this is a point that flat earthers come back to time and time and time again, and use this argument constantly. So Luke jumped in to explain that the plane maintains a constant altitude from the ground, and therefore on the smaller scale it looks flat, it looks straight, but it's actually curved alongside the curvature of the Earth. Very good explanation. Kind of met with blankness. He made the explanation very concisely, got to the point very quickly, and stopped. And they kind of looked at him like, "Well, that doesn't explain the point. Carry on. You need to give me more." But it was a perfectly succinct explanation. And then they kind of discussed it back and forth a little bit more before Dave Murphy kicks in to say, "You seem to be assuming a priori every time that we live on a ball."
I mean, we do live on a ball.
We do, but that regardless
wasn't an assumption of that.
Completely regardless of that, the question was, why, if the Earth is round, does a plane not need to adjust its nose? How do you explain that if the Earth is round? So the assumption was in the question, not in the answer, which Luke kind of explained that he was answering the question he was asked, and then tried to kind of manage Dave a little bit more by saying he was doing a thought experiment of a globe Earth and trying to answer this question because that was the question he was asked.
Sure.
To which Darren jumps in to point out that Luke has misunderstood the question and starts explaining how a gyroscope, which is not affected by gravity, maintains rigidity in space, and goes on a very long tangent about gyroscopes. So he was talking about how gyroscopes are not affected by gravity. They maintain rigidity in space, a phrase that he repeated ad nauseum, that it's upright as the plane curves, and then the artificial horizon, if it's upright as the plane curves, then the artificial horizon should roll backwards. So the gyroscope is what gives you this artificial horizon in a plane. It's what a pilot will use to adjust to.
But I don't think a gyroscope is not affected by gravity. I think it's always... the kind of gyroscopes that we'd use in a plane is always perpendicular to gravity.
But it maintains rigidity in space, Mike. I don't know what rigidity in space means.
No. Well, I know what he thinks it means. He thinks it means once you get a gyroscope spinning, it will always stay at that exact level, regardless of whether you turn it upside down or anything like that.
Yeah.
So he thinks that's rigid because he thinks it's unaffected by gravity.
Yeah.
So it will always stay flat, and as you move it around the Earth, it would have to kind of stay flat, so it would be perpendicular at one point and level another point, because he thinks rigid in the sense of no matter what the universe does around the gyroscope will not be affected by that.
Yeah, this was an incredibly frustrating point because they talked for a very long time about how a gyroscope is not affected by gravity, it's rigid in space. And the physicists are responding with a look of, but that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But giving them the benefit of the doubt that, well, I don't really know how a gyroscope works. Maybe they're right. Like maybe and then the response from the audience is, well, you're not prepared. You've not prepared for this. You don't understand even what a gyroscope is. You've not taken this seriously enough to prepare for it. So
they weren't willing to put their nickel down on something they weren't sure about, which is a very good principle to have. But unfortunately, it's not a good strategy in a conversation or debate. The flat earthers wanted to be a debate, the physicists wanted to be a conversation. It's not a good strategy in that kind of conversation because the audience took that as, well, you don't know anything at all.
Yeah.
But
in reality, if they'd kind of thought about it a bit more and gone, well, hang on, how can a gyroscope not interact with gravity? Surely it can only interact with gravity.
Yeah.
Then they'd have got, the physicists, they would have got to that point. They know how physics works.
But I thought of a good retort to this kind of thing. So their whole point, the point they're trying to get to with the gyroscope point was that as a plane is flying, it would have to keep pushing its nose down because if it was going to fly straight, it would just start going off into space. Because straight line, because they missed the fact that the plane is affected by gravity, and so the nose will be affected by gravity too.
The plane, the atmosphere, and everything else are within the gravitational. It's a closed system.
And it's equivalent of, if you look at it a different way, the plane goes up and the Earth, you could look at it as the Earth is sort of coming and going underneath it, as you see on the camera from the plane, at which point you can understand why it doesn't have to tilt its nose down, because its nose is very slightly tilted down if you were to look at it from a side view kind of thing. Yeah. But better retort to that is, if a plane not having to tilt its nose down is proof that the world is flat, then the cyclists at the velodrome at the Olympics, the fact that those handlebars don't turn, prove that the velodrome track is straight.
Yes.
Because they can't turn, so how can they go in a circle if the handlebars can't turn? They can't go in a circle, therefore all the velodromes must be actually a really, really straight line. Yeah. That even if they do 100 laps...
They're Pac-Man velodromes.
They're Pac-Man velodromes. Yeah. It's like, the walls are curved, and that's how you can go around, because you're going in a straight line.
The wheels on the bike would act as a gyroscope. They would, they'd have conservation of angular momentum as well, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So there was definitely a misunderstanding of how gyroscopes work in the room. I don't think it was necessarily with the physicists who did put their hands up and say, well, I don't really know how a gyroscope works. Then Gary moves on to get all this audience feedback that he was very keen to get. At which point one of the audience members criticised the physicists for not knowing how a gyroscope works. This was kind of peppered with a lot of patronising of the physicists. So one woman had said they're a fraction of our age. They haven't had time to do all the research. So she was kind of trying to defend the physicists for not knowing how a gyroscope works, but doing it in a very condescending way.
Yeah, she actually said to them, like, you guys, you're a fraction of our age. You don't understand this.
Yeah,
and
basically,
so I was like, I don't think you were defending them. She was just belittling them. And there was a lot of that.
But she thought she was defending them. And at that point, Gary also jumped in and said, that they weren't... that it's fine that they weren't prepared for this. They were prepared for plenty of other things. And there was kind of they were responding to this idea that they were unprepared for not imagining that gyroscopes might come up and therefore not researching gyroscopes ahead of time.
It's also worth pointing out, throughout this entire debate, I would say about a third of the audience is filming this, and a lot of them are filming it in very much a kind of like gotcha kind of style. It was really hostile.
The most packed session of the entire weekend. The whole room that was the fullest the room had ever been. Yeah. There were a lot of people stood up in the first third of the rows as well. Stood up, kind of. Yeah, it was. It was quite
edge of the seat kind of thing. You could feel the energy or the tension in the room. Yeah.
Which the physicists did a fantastic job of just pricking that. And bringing it to a much more. If they'd have not had that kind of humility and humour that they brought to that session, it would have been a very hostile environment. Yeah. And they managed to kind of keep it simmering below the surface rather than being so overt.
Yeah, if they'd have been the sort of the bombastic kind of fuck you, I've got the facts, fuck you, then it would have been an absolute horror show. And I'm so glad they were not like that.
Yeah. And that's a skill that is that a lot of skeptics don't have, and that it's very hard to get to that position. And I thought they did a fantastic job.
You see it with people debating creationists. I used to see it a lot with people debating creationists. They're like, well done, you've said all the right facts, and you've still looked like an arsehole here. Like, you're right, and also completely wrong.
No, I thought they did a fantastic job. So we came back from this little interlude of chatting to audience members about how great Gary is, basically. Well, that's what he wanted it to be. And went back to actual questions. So the next question was, if gravity is the only thing holding the atmosphere to the Earth and the atmosphere is next to the vacuum of space, then wouldn't the atmosphere be leaking?
I mean, some of the atmosphere does leak.
Well, that's basically the answer.
Yeah.
And we do get to the answer, and it is a flat earther that gives us the answer, but he doesn't take it in the way you would think. Or probably does take it the way you would think. Doesn't take it in the way that he should.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So Luke jumped in to try and explain hydrostatic equilibrium. This was a question that had been prepared as a question, and I think they'd prepared answers too. So Luke had a prepared answer. He was talking about gravity pushing down, but thermal air pressure pushing up. So you've got this hydrostatic equilibrium.
Yeah.
Dave kind of gave the impression at this point. Well, it didn't give the impression. He actually stated that it was a pressurized system. So the atmosphere is this is a pressurized system.
Well,
which is there is pressure, it isn't a pressurized system.
Yes, yeah. He was saying, how could you have a pressurized system without a container?
No, he wasn't even, he was using examples with containers, but he was kind of, the view that he put forward was that where the atmosphere ends and the vacuum of space begins is a hardline boundary. Yeah. Whether it's a physical boundary or whether it's just a boundary, he didn't really say what he thought that was. But it's a hard, in his mind, it had to be a hardline boundary, Earth's atmosphere, straight into vacuum of space. Which
but it's not.
That's not how it
can't
works.
Possibly be, because that wouldn't work. So Luke was trying to explain that you get this hydrostatic equilibrium and that things change throughout the atmosphere and that these pressures change how they interact with each other, and talked about all of that, to which Dave responded, well, we can do an experiment. If we've got a container and we evacuate it so it's a vacuum, pierce it, and then what happens? And that all the air would rush in. Luke tried his best to try and explain that that's not how it works, that there's a gradient between the atmosphere and the vacuum of space. There's no wall, to which Dave responded, but there has to be a boundary mechanism. But then after back and forth of this, Dave failing to get the point that Luke's trying to make, Luke trying to find every different way of explaining it and still not finding the one that will stick, because I don't think any explanation would have stuck. Dave found a Phys.org article that says that the atmosphere is leaking 90 tonnes per day. To which he says, see, it's making my point.
Yeah, his initial point was if the world is round,
then wouldn't it be leaking?
Yeah.
And so what he's not realised is he's gone, it's making my point. Therefore, it's consistent with the Earth being round.
Yes. Yeah.
But he also said, so how come we've got any atmosphere left? Because if it's leaking 90 tonnes a day, we have none left. It's like, nah, there's just loads of it.
There's loads of it.
there's shitloads of it.
The atmosphere has evolved over the lifetime of the Earth. We've had different types of atmosphere throughout the entire lifetime of the planet. It changes over time. It has changed over time. It will continue to change over time. There might be a point where our atmosphere does not sustain life.
Yeah.
The Earth might get blown to smithereens by the sun exploding before then, but
sure,
there is an evolution of atmosphere, and part of that is because the atmosphere leaks.
And it's one of the things that I thought that one of the physicists did very, very well, because he's saying, we are losing a lot of our gases, but we're also creating a lot of gases. He said, I've created some here tonight. So again, just going for that humility thing, which I thought was very, very good. There was a point that I think Dave was making in this as well, when he was talking about thermal. Have you got to think about the thermal vents or the thermal effects? So he's saying, right, if you get air and you heat it up, that hot air rises. But the air above that is going to be pushed up by the hot air rising. And the air above that is going to be pushed up by the other air rising into it. So if you take that all the way to the top, as soon as any air at the bottom moves, someone's going to be pushed out straight away.
Yeah, he kept talking about like a column of air.
A column of air.
Right.
It's like, no. It moves
pushed out the way.
It gets cooler, and then it loses its density, and then it starts to drop.
It's convection cycles. It's like, I wanted to say, okay, you know how when you heat a kettle, it starts getting hot at the bottom. That doesn't cause all of the water to rise out of the kettle. That's not how it works, because the cold water comes down and it gets a current kind of thing going on. That's one of the reasons we have wind, is because the air moves around as different heating. But he thought all air would just like, as soon as you light a match, it's just a column of air goes zoop, straight up into space. Yeah.
Then we had a bit of a break, and this was the point where we managed to... Oh, no, I think it was at the end we managed to chat to George briefly, but then we had a break, and the physicists had a chance to have a drink and a break from being bombarded by lots of angry flat earthers. And then we came back to questions from the audience, which there were loads of questions. A lot of them were kind of uninteresting, but then I've got... one that I think is genuinely interesting, where one of the questions from one of the audience members was, why is NASA faking it? And I think it's George who responds here, but I'm going just based on the sound of his voice because I can't remember who it was.
Right.
His response was, prove it. And the audience all laughed. But then he was kind of talking about the data that he uses from NASA every day, and talking all about how he gets a lot of data and he uses it to do his science, and there's no evidence that it's faked, and kind of trying to make that point and say, there's his work relies on a lot of that data, and it's his experiences that it's reliable. But the audience then push him to talk about NASA's live footage and all of the kind of public PR content that gets put out by NASA. And then there's a woman who's kind of talking. So the initial question was from a bloke in the audience who I think he was just kind of being a bit obnoxious by asking a question like that, but it led to quite an interesting conversation. And the woman in the audience who was kind of responding to George's point was whittered on for quite a while. She didn't have a microphone at first, and then she brings a microphone over, whittering on about different things from NASA and talking about the kind of public content that NASA put out. And then she rounds it all off with saying, have you actually looked at that we, the public, not from your scientific point of view, that we, the public, are given as data and facts of the experimentations that are taking place on the ISS as we speak? Have you looked at that footage? So referring to the videos that NASA puts out of astronauts on the ISS interacting with people, having conversations with people over web.
Yeah, and specifically like Chris Hadfield playing guitar and singing with someone, and you're like, well, and he said, well, how could he do that if there was a delay? They probably pre-rehearsed it. That they were probably playing it. It probably wasn't a live feed. It was a stunt. It was a PR stunt to just advertise, like to point out that NASA does some cool stuff. But
yeah, exactly. But she was referring to that as data and facts of the experiments that are happening on the ISS, and they're not. They are just PR. They're just showing NASA in a good light. They're getting people engaged with the science. They're getting people engaged with what NASA are doing. They're not about showing the public what the science and the data are. And it was very much this kind of thing of... And what frustrates me is that the public should be able to access data from scientific research, and it should be accessible to a degree. I know it's never going to be, if you're not a physicist, it's going to be hard to understand the physics of a scientific paper, but it should be written in the most accessible way that it can be. I hate that scientific literature is written to be almost often deliberately impenetrable in terms of language and how it's written, and because it makes it sound smarter, and it should be accessible to the public. But when the public are then saying, well, I want to ignore all the data and the scientific point of view, I want to just focus on the stuff that's put out to the public, well, that's not the science.
There's another great point around the faking it when they talk about the moon landing. I don't know if you got that in there. But it was one of the points that really stuck out to me is how good a job I think the physicists did in the situation they were in. And said, well, what about the moon landing? Do you believe that happened? And I think it might have been Luke. I
think it was Tom responded to say how proud he was.
He said, not only do I think it happened, but I think it's one of the most... I'm proud that it happened. I think it's one of the most incredible achievements we've ever managed as a species, and we should be immensely proud of it. I was like... Fuck me, that's an answer. That's a great answer. And I think there were a couple of people, I don't think they believed in the moon landing, but there were a couple of people struck by the force of how he was saying it, well, the passion with what he said, I think.
And then they kind of basically rounded up the whole thing with, still on this question about the public front of NASA. And George had responded that we see what you see. And the woman had asked, do you not see the wires? And he responded to that, no. And the audience were literally vocally, audibly very shocked at the fact that he said he couldn't see any wires.
The debate was a genuine highlight. It was, I mean, it was up there with the cosmic egg. It genuinely was, but in a very different way.
For very different reasons, yeah.
But I thought
it was fantastic.
What struck me is that physicists, even though they were relatively early on in their certainly in a PhD career, they had a very good handle on how to come across as something other than ivory-towered, walled information. We know better than you. It was very, very personable. They were giving people a time of day, which I thought was which is great at that level of certainly at that level of the career, but at any level of the career, it was a really, really good fist of what was a very difficult task.
Listeners may remember, before the Earth was flat and run by lizards, before we knew about the cosmic egg and the strangely Jewish spider, I spent a few weeks investigating the claims made by Dr. Catherine Hall, a placebo effect researcher who was interviewed by the American comedian Adam Conover for his podcast and TV show Adam Ruins Everything.
I just about remember that.
Back in the distant past.
It's been ages since you talked about placebo.
Back in a distant past. So far, Catherine has cited a study on asthma patients which shows that fake inhalers work just as well as albuterol, except that isn't true. Patients would tell you that they felt better, but when you test their lung function, you can see the fake inhaler actually did nothing at all. She also cited a study on sham surgery for bone spurs, which actually showed that the surgical intervention is a waste of time. She cited a study on the conditioned immune suppression using a green lavender flavoured drink, which was interesting enough in itself, but has very little to do with the placebo effect, since the paper is unambiguously looking at classical conditioning, and the only aspect of the paper which examined the effect of beliefs and expectations on any objectively measured clinical outcome actually found no effect. But I wanted to look at something a little bit different from this conversation today, because rather than look at another claim made by Catherine Hall, I wanted to look at a comment made by Adam Conover himself during the interview.
Okay.
Adam said, I read once about a study that there is such a thing as placebo sleep. When people are told they've had a good night's sleep, better than they actually had, they performed better on a cognitive test, which is really remarkable. Being told you got more sleep can make you perform better mentally. Now, up front, I want to make it clear that this is something that Adam is recalling off the top of his head during a podcast interview. He might have researched this ahead of time, but in the interest of being charitable, Adam is a comedian and a broadcaster. It would be unfair to give him shit for what he's saying here.
Yeah.
It's just potentially a point of interest.
Yeah. It's like, a study on placebo sleep. Let's go and have a look at that. So I'm not going to...
a starting off point rather than a rebuttal or an argument.
And Adam's description of the study is not too bad, actually. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad the way he's described the study and the kind of outline that he's given there.
Better than when Catherine Hall described the colour of the drink wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
This paper was titled Placebo Sleep Affects Cognitive Function. And was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology in 2014. 50 students, because of course it's students.
Of course it is.
It's a psychology study.
Well, and if you want to study the effects of sleep on your cognitive function, students seem the obvious population to do that in.
That is true.
So 50 students were recruited through their university to take part in a study.
I don't know if they're an obvious choice, though, because they fuck up their sleep and their cognitive function so much throughout without being really stereotypical about all students. But
if you want to study the effect of sleep deprivation on cognitive function, students are probably a good population.
Their bodies are probably already used to having this wild variation in how much sleep they get and how much they concentrate.
Circadian what? So 50 students were recruited through their university. And I think it's worth a mention, because I skirt over this almost every time. The numbers here are terrible. 50 US-based college students is hardly a representative or statistically meaningful sample of the population. And if homeopaths, naturopaths, chiropractors and the rest of them were citing studies with marginal effects at only 50 patients, we would be rightfully tearing them to pieces for doing it. But when it's placebo effect research, we let that go for some reason. That isn't to say that numbers are everything, of course. If I've got a study on a dozen patients with late-stage terminal cancer and all 6 in the test group go into full remission, that's still probably quite strong evidence there's something going on there, because the effect size is so large. But for small to medium effect sizes, you need those really big numbers to randomize out things which you can't properly control for. because without that, you risk a spurious result of 1 or 2 throwing off your entire data set. Anyway, 50 students were recruited. They were asked to rate how deeply they felt they had slept the previous night on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very deeply.
How deeply?
How deep? That's a very odd question.
It is very odd question.
So it's not how long have you slept?
Not how long did you sleep, not how well did you sleep.
Yeah.
Just
how deep.
How deeply do you feel you slept on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm not even sure how well you slept is a valid question. Because I don't know that how well you slept is reflective of how well you think you slept is reflective of how well you slept.
Well, no, I think that's part of the point of the study, though.
So it's an odd question that they've asked because they switch between using sleep quality and how well you think you slept as if they are synonymous.
Yes,
as if they're the same thing. But we'll come to that later. So they asked to rate how deeply they had slept.
They've done this in students, haven't they? Which means they haven't actually tested how well the students have slept at all. They've not.
Good God, no,
they've
Alice.
Not done any
that's what I was going to say.
Study at all.
It is even worse than that. The students were then given a 5-minute lesson on sleep quality and cognitive function. They were told that, on average, people spend 20 to 25% of their sleep in REM sleep. Mm-hmm. REM sleep, I'm sure listeners are roughly familiar with what REM sleep is.
At least the insomniacs will be, who constantly read anything they can about how to sleep better or what good sleep quality is, what a sleep cycle looks like.
So REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. It's unique to mammals and birds, from what I understand.
It's fucking creepy as fucking a tiny puppy. When Lupin used to get REM sleep when he was very little, he looked like he was having a seizure. It was terrifying. I was like, is he okay?
But it's the state in which our dreams are most active. So it's usually, you're dreaming when you're in REM sleep is usually how people think of it. It's not quite that simple, but that's how people tend to think of it. So they're told that on average, people spend 20 to 25% of their sleep time in REM sleep. They were then told that individuals who got less than 20% REM sleep performed worse on learning and memory tests. And they were told that individuals who got more than 25% REM sleep performed better on those tests.
Okay.
Right? And then the students were randomized into 2 groups. The first group was wired up to a fancy machine, which the researchers told them was able to measure how much REM sleep you'd got the previous night.
What?
Right?
What?
And those machines exist. Not wiring you up, but we have machines that enable us to try and figure out. Well, basically, they put you in a room and film you.
They do it while you're sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is a device that does it after the fact.
Yeah, it can't download REM data. That's the bit I was saying. What at is that? It's not. You can't say like, oh, this is how much you had. You can say this is. Yeah, we can observe you in REM sleep.
They told the students that when this device was introduced, there was significant skepticism about its ability to do what it said it could do. But it turns out that it can.
Right.
This is what they said. And nobody believed it when we brought it out, but turns out it really works. That was them trying to sell the machine to the students.
Yeah.
And they said that when in that kind of post-study survey thing, 88% of the students said they were convinced.
Fuck me. What were they studying?
Psychology.
It was a variety of students. So there was some studying natural sciences, some studying humanities. So it was a spread from across the university, apparently.
None of that's any excuse. You should have some to be a degree level student.
You should recognise that's bullshit. Yeah. Did it say what level of student we're talking about? Like how well they were doing? We took 50 students who were dropping out.
Yeah. All we have is undergraduate. Yeah. Anyway, this machine purported to measure all sorts of physiological symptoms, signs and symptoms that it would then extrapolate to how much REM sleep you got last night as a percentage. In fact, of course, the machines are completely fake.
Yeah.
What it did was actually display an EEG on a monitor for 5 minutes and then spat out a predetermined number.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So the first group was wired into this machine and eventually spat out that the previous night, the student under test had 16.8% REM sleep.
8.8.
16.8% REM sleep. That's what came dropping out of the machine for the first group of students. They were all told 16.8% REM sleep, which is below the 20% threshold that they had previously been told is the threshold at which it starts to impair you cognitively.
Yeah.
So that's the first group. The second group was wired to the same machine. Except this time they were told that they got 28.7% REM sleep. So well above the threshold that they were told actually improves cognitive function. So you with me so far?
Yes.
The first group was persuaded that
I'm feeling quite tired.
Yeah, I genuinely keep yawning.
The first group was persuaded that due to lack of sleep, they were cognitively impaired.
Yep.
The second group was persuaded that due to great sleep, they were cognitively boosted. They were then given a paced auditory serial addition test, or PASAT.
A PASAT.
They were given a PASAT.
Isn't that like a form of bolognese sauce?
I was thinking it was passata. I was thinking of passata.
They were given some passata.
But a PASAT is a type of Volkswagen.
Oh, it is a type of Volkswagen.
There's a type of Volkswagen.
The Volkswagen bolognese.
Throughout this, by the way, I'm probably going to refer to PASAT test, even though the T in PASAT stands for test.
Oh, you're going to call it PASAT-est? Like it's the PASATist.
Some of the other papers I've read about refer to it as the PASA test instead of PASAT.
Call it the PASA test.
No, I quite like having a personal PIN number. So this
is it
test,
a PASA test because you can you find out if you can pass a test?
This is going to be a paced auditory PASA test.
A PASA test. A PASA test.
PASA tested. The test involves listening to a tape recorder, and the tape recorder gives you a series of single-digit numbers, one every 1.6 seconds.
Right.
What you have to do is add up the first two numbers and then say the answer out loud. You will then be given a third number, which you have to add to the second number, not to the total.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah?
I'd be totally fucked with a test like that.
The first one, you just fail the first one, adding two numbers together.
I struggle to add single-digit numbers together sometimes.
So if the first two numbers are 8 and 3, Alice?
I don't know. Don't look at me.
11, that's good. If the next number is 4,
7.
You add that to the 3 to make 7. You don't add it to the 11 to make 14. So that's how that test works. So it's designed...
my God, there's an extra layer of confusion.
Yeah, it's designed to be hard even when you repeat it.
Yeah.
Which is what you want, because you don't want people kind of getting their eye.
Yeah.
And the results showed that students who were told they had impaired cognitive function scored 22.13 out of 50 on the PASAT test.
Okay.
And the students who were told they had boosted cognition, they scored 34.81 out of 50.
Okay, so that's an 8% difference.
Yeah, 12% difference. So 22.5 out of 50. To 34.8 out of 50. So
I wasn't listening.
A big, quite a big spread there. Statistically significant, which tells us next to nothing, because we have no baseline. There is no baseline here at all.
Yeah.
We don't know how well these students would have done before they'd been told they had a bad night's sleep.
Why didn't they just do that?
There is no control group that was told nothing at all, or a control group that was told, oh, your REM sleep was exactly within normal range. We don't know how good a night's sleep the students actually had, because they just asked them, how well do you reckon you slept? Which isn't necessarily a measure of how well they actually slept.
So this is confusing to me. So where does that figure come in?
They didn't even ask them how well they slept. They asked them how deeply they thought they slept.
Exactly, yeah.
But where did the deepness number come in?
We'll come to that.
Okay, because at the moment that's not involved. We've just got what you were told and the difference in your figures.
Spoilers, there's no correlation with the deepness number and the cognitive test. There's no statistics.
And there's probably no correlation between the deepest number, how well they think they slept, and how well they actually slept. All three of those will be very different measures, I imagine. If they'd asked the latter two.
So Adam Conover describes this as people told they had a good night's sleep perform better than they had, even though we don't actually measure how good a night's sleep you had, or how long you slept for. You could have slept really deeply for an hour, and said, I slept really deeply. I mean, it was for an hour, but it was really, I got a good solid 2 hours kip. It was great.
I don't know if I could tell how deep my sleep was.
No, it's a very meaningless question. Very meaningless question. So the controls here are next to non-existent. The only thing that they gathered was the students' self-report of how deeply they thought they slept, as if that means anything. So what did they do to establish a baseline? The researchers compared against the published adult norm for the PASAT test.
The adult norm?
Yes, which I'll come to what that means in a second.
I hate papers that do this. Papers very occasionally do this, and it is very occasionally because it's one of the worst things you can do. You should not compare your data to something somebody else has published. Do your own fucking controls.
Yeah, it's the major flaw with this paper is their baseline is the published adult norm figure for the PASA test.
You should not get your paper published unless there is a justifiable reason why you could not do a control.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for using somebody else's data
Yeah.
to control your data.
I mean, we may come
it
to
shouldn't
this,
be published.
but in case we don't, why is that a problem? Just so we, I don't know if you've got that in there, or
I'll come to that. I'll come to that kind of thing later on. So, the published adult norm figure is 36 plus or minus 13. That's the published adult norm. So quite a wide standard deviation there. But
that takes in both results.
36 plus or minus 13. This is not the right way to do this kind of study. You should be re-establishing your baseline, if for no other reason than to demonstrate that your execution of the test is good.
Yeah.
If you replicate the adult norm figure, you're like, oh well, great. At least I know my test is good, or you come, within a fair region of it. If your figure varies substantially from that, it could demonstrate that you've got a flaw in the execution of the protocol, or that the group you have on the test are better or worse than the general population at that test.
Yeah.
I talked about this a little bit when we talked about. Oh, we didn't talk about it on the show. I don't think we talked about it on the show, actually. There was an autism paper. I wrote about it for my blog, and there was quite a bit of media splash about it at the time. There was a paper relating to aluminium in the brains of people with autism.
We did do that on the show.
No, we did. Yeah.
And one of them, I mean, there were so many flaws with that paper, but one of the flaws with that paper was the fact that they'd basically controlled their data to things in the published literature.
Yeah.
Of which there was nothing in the published literature, which didn't help. But they were trying to say, well, in a healthy adult brain, there's this much aluminium, and then in these people who had died with autism, there was this much aluminium in the brain. But all their numbers looked roughly the same as each other, and without a healthy control, you have no idea if maybe the machine's just fucked. Maybe the machine just always gives you numbers around that level.
Yeah, and it could well be that in this test, the headphones weren't very clear, so people were struggling to hear the numbers. Or I don't understand why you couldn't have just ran a test with all 50 volunteers first.
Yeah.
Especially if the
before
test
you tell them anything.
Was designed to be hard. When it's repeated.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's designed to not be a test that gets easier the more you do it.
And it's probably like a minute. It's probably not a very long test.
Yeah, it's literally 50 numbers, one every 1.6 seconds. So it takes a couple of minutes to run a batch of these. You get 10 practice numbers first to get the hang of what you're meant to be doing. Not only that, but I looked up the source for this 36 plus or minus 13 figure, and it turns out it comes from they cited 1998 textbook. So I found the 1998 textbook. Turns out that textbook was quoting a 1988 paper. Misquoting a 1988 paper, as it turns out, because the original figure in the paper was 35.97 plus or minus 12.97 rather than 36 plus or minus 13. Not much in it, granted, but nevertheless, it's been rounded when it was put in the textbook.
You go to your primary sources, for one.
And do your own control.
Well, do your own control. Do your own controls, for one, but fucking hell.
But it turns out
But why would you think that a number from a textbook was reasonable?
Yeah.
That's not published peer-reviewed data. That is somebody summarising.
Yeah, and rounding up as it happens.
It's also from 1988, which I would argue that people were slightly better at low-level mental arithmetic then, because we rely so heavily on calculators and things now. I don't think it's a lot difference.
Quite possibly.
But I found I was probably better in 1998 than now at mental mathematics.
It turns out this 1988 figure is itself based on a sample of only 30 people. These 30 people from the original paper are aged 16 to 29, which is arguably not particularly comparable to the group under test, who are aged between 17 and 21. It's a much narrower and younger group.
How did this paper get published? I have no idea. How the fuck did this paper get published?
It's a much narrower age range on the group under test compared to controls, which is people aged 16 to 29. Maybe the age bracket is close enough, but this is still data from 30 Canadians 30 years ago being used as a baseline for a study on 50 US-based students today. Another thing that I thought was interesting here is being told you had a good night's sleep does not boost your cognition. That group actually performed at baseline. It was being told you had a bad night's sleep impaired your cognition. Which is perhaps not a surprise. Having a group of scientists with a fancy machine tell you that your brain isn't working properly is going to blow anybody's confidence. And could well introduce a bias where students are more likely to give up or guess when they struggle with a test because they've already been persuaded that they aren't good enough to get the answer.
Yeah, which isn't technically a nocebo. Or if it is, it's kind of, if the nocebo is a cluster of things, then this would be part of that cluster without being magic.
Nevertheless, the correlation here is statistically significant with a p-value of 0.005, which is a fairly small p-value, and is good for placebo research where we're usually getting very marginal p-values.
Yeah. Is it replicated? Because I know there's a big problem with replication. Like there was a couple of papers replicated recently in psychology, the marshmallow test. A listener even sent it to us. The marshmallow test where you give someone a marshmallow now or two later and they'll always take the one now. Didn't stand up to replication.
Yeah. We'll come back to the replication point because there's a point to be made there as well. Interestingly, if you recall, before the groups were randomized, patients were asked to rate how deeply they felt they slept on a scale of 1 to 10. And as I'd said before, there is no correlation between the figure given here and their performance on the PASAT test.
Yeah.
If they said, I had a great night's sleep, that did not predict whether they did well on the PASAT test or not.
Because people are really shit at knowing how well they slept.
Yeah.
Or how deeply they slept.
Or how deeply they slept, whatever that actually means. And it is worth noting that how deeply you sleep is not the same question as how well did you think you slept or how much REM sleep did you think you got.
They are two entirely separate questions.
Yeah.
Or anything objective. Or it's got nothing to do with your sleep.
I don't see how you can know how deeply. The only thing I can think, if somebody asked me how deeply I slept, I might try to think if I recall any dreams, because if you wake up at the end of a REM cycle, you tend, like if you wake up
remember
after
your dreams better.
If you wake up like during your REM cycle while you're dreaming, you're more likely to remember than if you wake up in a different point in your cycle.
But I wouldn't
But
go to
you
that.
still might have slept really, really deeply several times through the night, just woken up at a different point.
Yeah. I wouldn't go to that. I would think, well, do I remember waking up several times during the night? No. Okay, I guess I slept deeply. So even then, our interpretation of that question is wildly different.
Well, I also tend to interpret deep sleep as being distinct from REM sleep. If I'm in deep sleep, I'm not in REM. I'm like well asleep.
Yeah, because I thought REM isn't deep, is it?
That was my understanding. Yeah. But again, it's all these weird nebulous terms that they're using without very good definitions. Now, I can kind of see why they would say, why they would not say, how much REM sleep do you think you got last night? Because that's just, people are going to look at you and go, what the fuck are you talking about?
But if you're going to ask a fuzzy, indistinct question, ask a question that everybody's going to roughly understand or have some level of interpretation of.
Like, how many hours of undisturbed sleep did you get last night?
Also,
that's not a hard question.
The students were specifically told that it was the amount of REM sleep that impacts their cognition, not how deeply they slept.
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of, it's very confused, this paper. It's really all over the place. Also, this idea that if you get more than 25% REM sleep, you do better on tests. And if you get that, I don't even know that that's true.
No, I think it's probably
I'm
bullshit.
not sure that it is.
I think that's just stuff that they've made
the REM
up.
sleep isn't the important stuff. It's the proper deep sleep. The 90 minutes of proper deep sleep.
Yeah, and that 25% seems like a weird mark. It's saying, because if you get more than that, you perform better.
Yeah,
that's got to have an upper limit.
Yeah, you get 100% REM sleep. You're Einstein.
Yeah, exactly.
For the next day.
Well, you're Einstein, but you're not awake. So what you want to go for is 99%. Like 99% of sleep. Yeah. But then just like a minute of
wake up briefly and be a genius.
Like that episode of Red Dwarf where Holly compressed all of his time, his life into a very short area.
Anyway, the experimenters then followed up with a second experiment.
Okay.
A second experiment. This second experiment had 114 students, so better numbers.
Better.
Not brilliant numbers still, but better numbers, who were recruited through their university. This time they were split into 4 groups, which means actually the group sizes were about the same.
Gotcha.
The first 2 groups just replicated the first experiment.
Okay.
So they were wired to a fake machine, told a lot of REM sleep, a little bit of REM sleep, and then were given the tests.
Et cetera, yeah.
Another group was asked about their sleep the previous night, but were not wired to a fake machine. They were just given the test. So how deeply do you feel? It's like, 6 out of 10. Right, go and have this test. And the final group were given a 9-item questionnaire about their lifestyle, which included the question, how deeply do you think you slept? And they threw the other 8 questions away and just used that one because they didn't want the nature of the question to hint at the topic of the experiment.
Okay.
So that's what they did for the final group there.
It seems very much closing the gate after the horse is bolted.
Yeah, and I get the feeling
we've got a shit study, but we've tried really hard on this little tiny
little bit of narrow thing.
It does sound like I know which direction this gate will have shut as well.
So one group was told they had bad sleep, one group was told they had good sleep, one group was asked about their sleep, and one was asked about their sleep in a sneaky way. They then administered the PASAT test again to all groups, but they did several other tests at the same time.
Not at the same time,
Sneaky.
but presumably sequentially.
Yes.
Did they
It'd be
give
really
any
hard
of
if
them
it
a
was.
lecture this time?
Yes, they were.
Just
It was
all four, or just the two groups?
They actually it didn't say. It didn't say one way or the other as to
That's
whether
very
they got
important
the lecture
information,
this
because
time.
there's no point giving somebody a lecture on sleep and then saying, do this questionnaire, but to disguise that this is on sleep, we'll give you questions on things that
Unless
aren't
it's the other way
related to
around.
sleep.
Unless you do the questionnaire first.
After the questionnaire first, and
then
then give them the
Maybe,
sleep lecture.
okay.
In which case, it could
They
have
were told by the time the test started, they were all told, right, this is a sleep study.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But just at the point they were asking the question, they didn't want to skew the answer by you knowing it was a sleep study.
I like the idea they're doing several of the tests at the same time, like literally at the same time. So you've got the numbers going in your head, and there's like colours flashing up, and someone's like poking them with a stick.
So they did a controlled oral word association test, or COWAT.
A cowat, not a
COWAT
passat.
test. This is where students were given 1 minute to list as many words as they can think of, beginning with a given letter.
Oh, they do that when they're measuring whether President Trump is mentally fit.
Do they?
Yeah, that's one of the tests they do. It's part of a thing around Alzheimer's as well, I think.
Well, they're giving the COWAT test.
You also
That's
have
what
to-
it is. We know what it's called now.
You have to recognise animals, so they show you some animals and recognise
Okay.
them. And you do that number test. Or, no, you count backwards. You count backwards from 50 in sevens, I think.
Right.
Something like that to see how far, and then it'll stop you after a little while.
Yeah, that sounds like a pain in the arse.
Because Trump did it, and also the judge on Spiraled had to do it.
Okay.
To test cognition. Because when Trump has gone about, like, I am, clearly mentally fit, that I've passed the test. Part of the test is, can you recognise a picture of a lion? It's like, you're bragging about the fact that you know what a lion looks like.
They did the symbol digit modalities test, which is where students are given a list of numbers and an associated list of symbols. So, like, 1 is linked to a square, and 2 is linked to a plus, and 3 is linked to an arrow, or whatever. They're then given the list of symbols and have to fill in the numbers underneath.
Okay.
So you have to go back and reference which symbol is that and which symbol is that, and go and fill that in.
But you'd have to remember it.
It's not. I don't think it's a memory test.
Okay.
It's just
A
associating
writing test.
the right symbol with the right number. And they're given a list of symbols. They have to fill the numbers in as quickly as possible, and it's the time that it takes you.
Right, gotcha.
Is the measure that we use.
Okay, that's good.
And finally, there is the digit span test. This is where the experimenter reads a short list of digits to you, like 157. And then you have to repeat back what they've just said. So you say 157. When you get it right, they add a digit. So,
like the Simon game.
like Simon says, yeah. So that once you've got 3 digits correct, they'll do 4 digits. They'll keep doing that until you get it right, and they'll do 5. They keep doing that until they get it right. Then they do 6, etc.
Then they get to pi.
And the score is how long is the longest list that you can recite back to them.
Blimey.
The experimenters this time were also blind as to which group the students were in.
Oh, okay.
Which means they weren't last time.
Which means they weren't before, yeah. Oh, for Christ's sake.
Another possible source of bias there. Anyway, results. For the digit span test, no effect.
Yeah.
Being told you had good or bad night's sleep did not change your performance on the digit span test. For the symbol digit test, no effect. Being told you had a good or bad night's sleep did not change your performance on the symbol digit test at all. For the PASSAT test, the serial addition test, there was an effect here. It was the same effect, again, P of 0.005, but my criticisms from before remain valid. There was no baseline established here. They used that same published norm from that paper from 1988. They, measured against that figure again. And again, this observation, even assuming that was a legitimate thing to do, the observation could be explained by the bias introduced by knocking the confidence of the students before they take the test. This isn't about placebo sleep making you better. This is about someone telling you your shit making you worse. But then we come to the COWAT test.
Okay.
This is the test where you list as many words as you can think of, beginning with a nominated letter. And the letters they used, which are the standard letter, there's a few versions of COWAT, but they used...
How long did they give you?
There is. I haven't written down what it was. There is a time limit.
Is it 30 seconds? Because if so, can we do it each and see how we get on?
Well, no. Let's not do a cow. Let's not do a cow test.
Live cowetting.
So the letters they give you are F, A, and S.
Okay.
In contrast with the PASSAT test, students told they had a good night's sleep before doing the COWAT performed better than baseline.
Okay.
And students who were told they had a bad night's sleep performed worse. Performed at baseline, rather.
Okay.
So,
where did they get the baseline from for this one?
Do you want to have a guess where they got the baseline
from the same
Alice?
book?
It wasn't from the same book, but it was just by looking at the the literature and taking a baseline from there.
And by literature, you mean textbook, potentially.
So I'll come to the baseline.
Okay.
So the published mean in this case is 43.51 plus or minus 9.4. That's the published mean. The students who had a good night's sleep scored 51 plus or minus 11, and the students with a bad night's sleep scored 43 plus or minus 12. So actually, everyone was within one standard deviation of the published mean, but it's a statistically significant result. The p-value is I didn't write down what the p-value was, but it was a statistically significant result, apparently. But this is not against any measured baseline for this group of students. The baseline in this case came from a paper titled COWAT Meta-Norms Across Age, Education and Gender, which was published in Applied Neuropsychology in 2001. That paper itself aggregated data from a variety of studies published between 1986 and 1999, totaling 634 people aged between 15 and 39. So again, a much broader age range, 15 to 39. Effectively, their group was under 40s.
Yeah,
was the group that was the mean that they used, which is perhaps not a great fit for a group of students aged 17 to 21.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the raw data that's in the paper, I can see the closest match in terms of age range was actually a paper from 1995 on 19 people who were aged 18 to 25. That's the closest match to the age bracket that they were studying. And when you look at those figures as the baseline, suddenly there was no effect for the cognitively boosted students. Of course, that's me cherry picking, but it underlines the fact that using...
Or it's them cherry picking.
and only 19 students in that paper. But it underlines the fact that using published baselines is a bad idea. Do not do that.
Yeah.
Not only does the selected baseline represent a much broader age range than the test groups, but the test groups are all students in higher education. So may have a higher IQ or vocabulary than the standard than the general population.
Yeah, of course.
These are all university students, you know. They're all at least good enough to get into a university.
They're all university students who, like, 80% of them believed in
this weird magic machine. Yeah. This is why it is good practice to measure the baseline from the group that you have, so you can control for things like this.
Is there any data on what words the students said during the COWAT test?
No.
Because if they were doing S and any one of them never said student or sleep or study, I mean, that's basically a head start.
Overall, then, this is not a study that I'm particularly impressed by. Despite the claim placebo sleep improves cognitive function, which isn't just the claim made by Adam Conover, but was in all of the press coverage at the time when this paper came out in 2014. Students actually do worse on a PASAT test, but better on a COWAT test, and it doesn't change their scores on the other tests. There's nothing consistent here. I'd like to see a strong, robust replication of these results. Before it's something that I'm going to find particularly persuasive, because I think this paper is all over the fucking shop.
It should never have been published. There's no way that should have ever been published.
I think it's a horrendous paper. More importantly, I'm not particularly persuaded that the effects that they're talking about in this study are anything more than a cousin to the kind of placebo effects that we've talked about on the show previously. Although the authors here compare themselves to a study we've talked about before. So in the paper, they say, we had the idea for this study when we read this other study, and the study that they'd read was the one where they told people cleaning hotel rooms that a good exercise makes you lose weight, which was a study that failed to replicate.
Yeah.
When they replicated that study, it actually the effect wasn't there anymore. But nobody is talking about physiological changes here. In the hotel study, at least there were physiological changes. They were measuring like body mass index and body fat percentage and your waist diameter and things like that. There were actually physiological measures there. There are no physiological measures being made in this study. This is not gastric ulcers healing faster because you've had 4 pills instead of 2 pills. And this is not a cold going away faster because you insist you're fighting off a cold instead of coming down with a cold. And this is not an inactive pacemaker improving congestive heart failure. This is a psychological stimulus producing a psychological effect. Well, big fucking whoop.
Yeah.
This is a problem with the placebo effect as a kind of singular entity, or even the placebo effect as a bucket where we throw our controls and our biases. It contains all sorts of unrelated shit. Because the placebo narrative is so prevalent, all of this cruft, which may include genuinely interesting effects, is lumped together and used to kind of mutually support each other.
Yeah.
Because someone told you that having a decent night's kip makes you better at listing words beginning with F, and that classical conditioning can suppress your immune response, Therefore, we shouldn't campaign against homeopathy because, as we know, the placebo effect is really powerful. So, Marsh.
Yes.
The latest episode of Be Reasonable has just come out.
It has. It's a good one. It's Michael Fullerton, who is a 9/11 truther who runs a site called, I think it's skeptopathy.com.
Yes.
And he styles himself as a
skeptopath.
Skeptopath, yeah. No, we're the skeptopaths. He styles himself...
We're skeptopaths.
We are, yeah.
Is that a portmanteau? Are we skeptical psychopaths? Is that where he's going with that?
I guess so. It's that we're not proper skeptics.
The suffix path is not necessarily... Like, it's psychopathy. It's not...
Yeah.
Yeah,
also, we're skeptics to the point of it being a disorder.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think his point is that we aren't real skeptics because we start with a de facto conclusion, don't follow the evidence, and he apparently follows the evidence.
Right.
Is he a flat earther? Because that's what I think as well.
But he styles himself as a scientific 9/11 truther. He doesn't get involved in why it would have happened a certain way. He doesn't get involved in who was behind it. He just looks at the evidence.
Yeah.
And he looks at the evidence of how the towers fell and says there's absolutely no evidence that the planes were responsible for the towers falling.
Except for them hitting them.
But that's them hitting. That's not the... Once the towers start to fall, then the plane hitting it is... Irrelevant.
It's not, though.
That's a correlation-causation fallacy.
No.
Just because planes hit towers and towers fell doesn't mean the planes made the towers fall.
No, it doesn't mean that.
Well, find out how I deal with that question and more on the next Be Reasonable.
Okay. And Alice, you're speaking at
Newcastle Skeptics.
Yes. Toon Lake.
Yes, on June 13th, which is a Wednesday at 7:30 at Tyneside Irish Centre.
Or June 14th, as they'd say up there.
And I'm going to write an actual ending for my talk, because so far I've given it 12 times, 15 times, and I haven't written a proper ending. I just kind of stop.
If you write one now, you can practice it a couple of times before you get out to Australia.
That's
a good idea.
That'll be a good thing. So you see what ending works, like test audiences.
Yeah. So Newcastle will be my first test audience.
Okay.
I've got another test audience coming up, but I'll tell you about that on a future show.
And you can go back and do reshoots when the ending doesn't work out very well, and eventually you'll get to something that the studio's happy with.
The talk is very well polished, and I think it's a good talk.
It's fabulous talk.
But it does just stop at a point where I run out of things to say.
Kind of like Avengers Infinity War.
So I'll do some fluffy words at the end. Basically, I just need more meandering chat at the end. I think.
Yeah, a little bit of meandering chat. I think the next talk I'm giving is going to be the Friday of Nexus for the Science-Based Medicine Day, where I'm going to be talking about good thinking's work challenging pseudoscience in the heart of the British establishment.
Yes.
So I'm going to be doing that. Although I am thinking, I am up for other talks. I have a bad PR talk, which some people might not have seen. I've got my Adventures in Pseudoscience talk. If anybody's in New York and wants me to do either of those, I'd be happy to do that. I'm also thinking of writing another talk, maybe about this whole flat Earth stuff.
Maybe.
I'm thinking of putting that together. If people might be interested in that, give me a shout.
Also, would you be willing to stray as far as New Jersey to go and do a talk?
I possibly would be.
It's not that far. So if you're thinking, I'm in New Jersey and Marsh is going to New York, it's a disgrace.
I won't go to actual Jersey, though.
No.
Or actual York. I've been to York for plenty of them. It's just a long way from New York. Yeah.
And of course, we've got QED.
We have got QED.
Tickets for QED are hurtling out at the moment.
They are.
We are over 2/3 done. Literally, it's the fastest selling QED we've ever had.
And it's the first one in about 6 years that Alice can't make. Coincidence?
Correlation does not imply causation,
I think there's two other much bigger factors that are at play.
I think Alice has been keeping attendees away from QED. The threat of possibly bumping into Alice has meant people were a bit unsure about signing up.
People who know me like me better than you guys. People like SWAC listeners like me better.
That is true. That is true. That is very, very clearly
and quite
true.
rightly. So tickets for QED are available. They're priced £113, £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18. You can buy your ticket at qed.com.org, and you should probably do that really quickly because at the moment, the way our kind of trend line is looking, we're not making it through the summer before we're actually selling out properly of tickets.
It looks possible.
Aside from that, then, I think that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.